Chapter 7 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 7 The Dotted Line. Finley woke to the sounds of an unknown world, groaning as he turned over in his makeshift single bed. His silvery blonde hair fell down across the line of his eyes, tickling where it touched his skin. Another night of dreamless sleep. Another morning waking up with an empty space by his side. In the back of his mind, the image of Thorn that greeted him faded away with the last of the light. Elsewhere in the world, things began to wind down to their sleepy conclusion. Street lamps flickering to life, darkness circling the last candy floss clouds of spring. Waking up in the evening was something he wasn't entirely used to yet, and his body clock rebelled every chance it got. He shimmied over to the edge of the mattress, letting his feet dangle towards the floor with a concealed yawn, as he watched speckles of dust dancing lazily in the lamplight. The wooden floor beneath his feet was always warm to the touch, and he wondered if it was heated by the natural temperature of the cavern. He flexed his toes comfortably, like a cat might knead its claws on a new surface.
I feel like I'm becoming more like Salo every day, he thought. I wonder if that's part of the spell.
Outside his door, he could hear the commotion of the other spirits rising, could just about make out the low hum of their combined voices as they went about their usual routines. Abby's laugh carried through the vents, bright and vibrant. Though he hadn't been here long, he was already starting to grow fond of the other Amorini. They reminded him so much of the people he used to go to scouts with as a kid. Zany, full of stories and strange anecdotes from other countries. Things that made him feel like the things around him in the dark weren't as bleak and terrifying as they had first appeared. He remembered what his scout leader had said any time they faced something new in the dark.
Shine your torch on it. Once you see it for what it really is, you'll no longer be afraid of it.
The children around the campfire had beamed, chanting, "Shine your torch on it! Shine your torch on it!" He crossed the room to the sink and splashed water on his face to drown out the last vestiges of sleep, feeling the cold spray as it dripped along his throat and dampened the line where his collarbones peeked out from beneath his sleep shirt. The droplets were faint like a lover's touch, and he sighed as they were licked away by the rough tongue of the towel. Like Thorn, the memory of them was already beginning to fade away as his skin dried. He walked towards the end of the bed where only a few hours ago Scrappy had popped by to drop off his new clothes in a small cardboard box. He reached for it, surprised by its weight, as he laid it on top of his tousled sheets. Slipping his fingers under the flaps, he pulled it apart with ease, reaching in to address its contents. The jacket that he pulled out first was heavy, long, and black, and obviously made to withstand the elements. Silver-toned buttons lined the inner track of it, the pockets large with glistening new zips. It had a hood, too, one that hung heavy and thick as a scarf at the back of the neck. He rubbed the material between his fingers, testing its weight on his open palm. Laying it across the bed, he pulled out the jacket's companions, a long pair of black trousers and a black sleeveless shirt with matching dark buttons. The fact that they looked like funeral attire was not lost on him. Finley admired his reflection in the mirror opposite him as his thin fingers fidgeted with the final stiff button of the jacket. He looked like a soldier, one that would have appeared in an old black and white photograph. As the days went on, more and more of the blonde was sucked from his hair, replaced with wispy tones of silver and white.
What would Thorn think if she saw me like this? He wondered. Would she even recognize me?
That thought made him frown, and he shook his head, scattering the thoughts.
You have to stop doing this, he pressed. You need to focus on right here, right now. Get through today.
But it was one thing to believe he was dead and gone when inside this house, hidden away from the world and the people who knew him. It was quite another to believe it when he was out on the familiar streets, seeing the cobblestones he had ridden his bike over as a child, hearing the sound of the cathedral bells as they echoed between every cafe and charity shop. He felt a tug of longing as he thought back to those things he had barely noticed when he was alive, now held so much more significance, like rocks turned to gold by some unknown alchemic force. He straightened his back and gave himself one last look in the mirror before he turned and reached out towards the door handle.
Shine your torch on it,
he breathed as he pulled the door inwards, stepping out into the bubble of sound beyond. The smell of shoe polish greeted him as he closed the door behind him, and he traced the lines of the wall and the banister as he headed towards the rowdy sounds of conversation. A few heads turned whenever he descended into the living room, and at the center of the tumult, Saulo sat perched on the kitchen table, his sleek black tail mapping out the space behind him.
Evening, Master Evans,
he greeted, eyes the sharp color of fallen galaxies.
You're looking well. The uniform fits, I presume.
Like a glove, Finley responded as he approached the table, fidgeting with the collar. Abigail whistled appreciatively. Looks good on you, new guy. Black suits you.
In black suits, everybody?
Alvaro grunted. Oi, don't be such a grump, Abby hissed, nudging his leg under the table pointedly. Finley leaned against the edge of the wooden surface, scanning the assortment of papers covering its surface.
What's all this stuff? He asked. This is your contract, Saulo explained. Outlined here are the rules for becoming one of my Amarini. Each selected spirit must make up his or her own mind as to whether or not this is the eternity they will choose. I didn't realize I got any choice in the matter, Finley commented.
We've had a few people before that weren't ready for this kind of thing, Abby admitted. They just hopped on a boat with omnibus and poof, gone to the wide blue yonder.
It's that easy?
Finley questioned, green eyes looking up at her. She shrugged. Dying was the hard part.
And make sure that you read everything carefully, came Reichardt's voice from the far side of the table. Once you have made your decision, there is no going back. The changes to your soul will become permanent, and you will officially become a spirit of the in-between.
He lifted a cup to his lips and took a quiet sip,
The heat of the contents momentarily steamed up his glasses. Saulo stepped aside so that he could look at the ancient, weathered document. Under the harsh light overhead, the paper had curled up at the edges. Dog-eared and discolored, black ink covered the surface with intricate swirls of text. His eyes were drawn to his own name, penned neatly on every line by a delicate hand. Amarini contract ver 3,482,642.0.1. I, Finley Evans, hereby and with full understanding and competency, relinquish my right to an afterlife, and thereby commit my soul to the in-between henceforth ad infinitum. In line with the above, I, Finley Evans, commit to following the guidelines and accept punishment for breach of the guidelines up to and including the total destruction of my immortal soul. Rule number 1. The location, inhabitants, and inner workings of Psychopomp Drive are classified information and are not to be shared with any being outside of Psychopomp Drive. Rule number 2. It is forbidden to work cases related to subjects you knew from your mortal life. If you receive such an assignment, you must inform a superior being immediately. Contact with living person or persons related to your life above is strictly forbidden. Rule number 3. The command of a god, Shinigami, primordial entity, grim, celestial being, or other sentient personification of existence can overrule the rules of this contract. Finley hesitated as he traced the words of the second rule with the tips of his fingers. By becoming an Amarini, by continuing on this path, he was giving up the one good thing he'd had in life. Placing his name on the contract felt like dying all over again. The shell of the doll felt suddenly cold and empty, and he felt something resembling nausea in a stomach that he no longer had.
Am I really ready to say goodbye to Thorn, to Mum, to Elijah and James and everybody?
Could he continue existing in any form if it meant that he would never hold the one he loved again, in this life or the next? He reached up a hand to touch his face and realized with alarm that he had started to cry. He rubbed his eyes with the backs of both hands frantically, trying to keep the incoming tide at bay. He felt the gentle brush of hands on his back and shoulders, and the soft fur of the animal in front of him, as the spirits of the in-between made themselves known. He heard the soft sound of a whimper and wondered if the broken noise had come from his own mouth.
I don't know if I can do this,
he breathed, voice shaking.
How can anyone do this?
Reichardt's voice was much closer now, the French twang right by his ear.
It is rule number 2, isn't it?
Finley nodded silently, not trusting himself to speak again. Sweeps of light-colored hair fell over his eyes. They hid the tears that started to fill his vision again. He felt the man's hand squeeze his shoulder.
They will never stop loving you, Finley.
The younger man swallowed the painful ache in his throat.
But will she ever forgive me?
He croaked. He looked up at his taller companion. His head circled with the bright light behind him like a halo. He looked ethereal and otherworldly then, like he had taken on the form of an angel or saint rather than a man. The tall Amarini breathed in sharply, his nostrils flaring as he tried to keep his own emotions locked away. His blue eyes reflected the lamplight as he blinked at him slowly.
I have to believe that our loved ones understood why we had to make this choice.
Reichardt was the first of them to make this decision, the first life given back to a fallen soul. He had been all alone amongst the spirits, with only a cat and his conscience for a guide. Was there someone who loved him once too, in an afterlife far away that he would never be able to reach? Had he had to watch them cross the river Styx on a boat he would never have a ticket for?
The choice here means that our loved ones will always be kept safe. We guard them and their children, their grandchildren. We watch over the people we love most and the people they love most.
The man continued, adjusting his glasses as he angled his face away. His expression was blank, like he had buried all the pain and erected a great wall in front of it.
My fiancée died more than 200 years ago now. She lived a full and happy life. She got married, had 3 daughters who looked just like her.
He huffed out an exhale through his nose, folding his arms across his chest.
When the corruptors came, I made sure that they were safe. I watched her family grow from a distance, listened when their mother told them stories about a man that she used to know.
Was that enough?
Finley questioned. Reichardt turned his bright eyes to meet those in the room around him. The others reflected the same sad smiles back at him.
It was,
he confirmed. To his right, perched on a kitchen chair, with his knees drawn up into his chest, Spectre let out a low sound, not unlike a whimper.
Forever is a long time,
he muttered, his breath airy as a draught. His cat-like ears were gray rather than black, and pressed in against the sides of his head.
But you promised her happiness, and this is the greatest act of love you have ever seen.
Finley faced him with a frown.
Who did you leave behind, Spectre?
Spectre sighed, blue eyes wet and large.
I left behind the other me,
he answered, and then hummed to himself, rocking where he sat in the chair.
I had to save them from the blackness. My death made them sad, but I was able to make them happy again.
Abigail reached out and wrapped both of her arms around Finley, drawing him in against her in a comforting embrace.
No one will think less of you if you go, she whispered. This has to be your decision.
He leaned in against her, taking a small comfort in her warmth.
Thank you for this,
he said, and then raised his head as he gently pulled himself away. He met the cat's eyes before him, taking note of the small silvery pen resting in his mouth. He reached out an open hand, and Saulo dropped it into his palm.
Are you sure of this, Finley?
He asked softly. The silver-haired man nodded.
I know I can make her happy again,
he said, and pressed the nib into the page, drawing it across the paper in the familiar shape of his own name. Elsewhere in the underground, miles and miles away in the darkness, a book dropped from a shelf in a quiet library. The pages flicked open to a central passage, as if by a passing breeze. 3 lines down, glowing white and then gold, with something that could only have been described as magic, was a name: Finley Evans. To be continued in Chapter 8.